Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us to explore the issue of rising drug use in Door County. This forum is the first event in a new collaboration between League of Women Voters of Door County and Door County NOC. My name is Susan Coho, Chair of the League of Women Voters of Door County. League is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. While never endorsing a candidate or party, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keep our community strong. An organization of women and men, we encourage informed and active participation in government in two ways: voter service activity, informing and encouraging citizens to participate in our elections, addressing issues, working to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influencing them through education and advocacy. The League's collaboration with Door County NOC is based on our shared nonpartisan missions of maintaining high standards of independence, fairness, and accuracy in educating the public on issues. The quality of government depends on the level of informed, active participation by its citizens. Public forums on issues must be conducted in ways that are nonpartisan, fair, transparent, and civil. We hope to accomplish this in our collaboration with Door County NOC. The amount that League accomplishes is limited only by the number of people that are willing to work. Please consider joining our efforts or help us by making a donation. Review the materials on the tables and sign up for more information. We need and welcome your help. Thank you to Crossroads at Big Creek for hosting us. And we join them in acknowledging the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region, having ancient, historical, and spiritual connections to the land their preserves now encompass, and to the land and water they now steward. Thank you to Door County NOC staff and to our League representatives, Pat Szynski, Mary Ann O'Dowd, and Helen Bacon for planning this event. And now I would like to introduce Andrew Phillips, Executive Director of Door County NOC.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Susie, and thank you all for being here. My name is Andrew Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of Door County NOC. We are an independent, online, nonprofit news organization. We're supported by reader donations and grants. We produce in-depth local news for Door County. One of our major focuses is doing big picture, deep dive reporting on important issues affecting residents, and helping to lead productive community conversations about those issues. Tonight's event and a series of stories that built on is an example of that work. We're excited to partner with League of Women Voters on this and future events. As Susie said, our partnership is based on our shared values of informing the public and helping to identify possible paths forward. The goal is to build a news source that all residents, especially those most affected by the issues we cover, can see themselves in and feel ownership of. We want to hear from you, not only tonight, but an ongoing conversation throughout in a two-way conversation. We want to know what issues most affect your lives, what information would be most useful, and how we can best serve it. If you're interested in supporting our work, you can sign up for our newsletter, info tables in the back, and you can become a member by making a donation of any amount or setting up a recurring monthly donation on our website. A bit about tonight's forum. Leading up to our discussion tonight, Door County NOC has published a series of stories about opioid and meth addiction. We've covered some of the past, how we got here, with two stories in June, and the present, where we are now. Another story published today. The reporting for this series is being done by Emily Small, moderator for this event tonight. If you haven't had a chance to read those articles, I encourage you to do so. Our hope tonight is that our discussion can turn toward the future. Where do we as a community go from here? And that this discussion will help inform the next part of our series. We want to hear from you. We encourage audience participation. We ask that you be civil, respectful of other audience members and panelists, and focused on gathering information, sharing their experiences, and exploring solutions. I want to thank Emily so much for her excellent reporting, and to thank Emily, our panelists tonight, and others who have been willing to be interviewed, for shedding light on these important issues. Thanks also to Heidi Hodges, our editor and photographer, to our board of directors and volunteers for their support in making this happen. And to the League of Women Voters, including Cindy, Pat Zazinski, Marianne O'Dowd, Ellen Bacon, and Morgan, for their partnership in putting this event together. A few housekeeping items before we get started. For those who have not already come, refreshments will be available during the break and after the program. Back in the room at the top of the stairs. The bathrooms will be found down the corridor. Stairs. And a reminder that this forum is being recorded on Zoom. The camera can't see you, it's just pointed at the panelists. But if you choose to ask a question during the event, the camera might pick up. And last but not least, please silence your cell phones if you have not done so already. With that, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Talk about this and be with us. I'm going to introduce our panelists. They're really the stars of the show.
Teach your voice.
Louder, louder. Thank you all for coming.
Yes.
I'm going to introduce all of our panelists right away. We have this, I'll go right next to me here. This is Joe Krebsbach, the Director of Health and Human Services in Door County. Next to him is Colleen Nordine. She's the District Attorney in Door County. Next to Colleen is Sheriff's Deputy Pat McCarty. Next down is Lisa Barnaby, AOTA therapist with contracted with the drug treatment court program here. Next to Lisa is Jennifer Singer. She's a board member at the 115 Club in Sturgeon Bay. She's a drug treatment court program participant and a recovering heroin and meth addict who is 9 months sober on 14th. And end of the table there is Timmy Sinclair. She is with United Way of Door County and she's the community outreach coordinator of health and basic needs. Did I get all that right? Thank you all for being here and agreeing to do this. So how we'll do this is I have some topics and questions. If there are questions throughout, go ahead, raise your hand. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I would ask that you wait until maybe everyone is done speaking after each question, or at least the person's done speaking before you ask a question. Does that sound good? I guess first I'd like to, and we'll just go down the list or down the table. If you each briefly describe your involvement with substance use disorder, whether personal, professional, or both, and maybe a little bit about how you'd characterize the issue in Door County right now.
Hello, everybody. Joe Krebsbach from Health and Human Services. Might be the old guy on the table, so I might just be a historian here. I started this kind of work back in 1986 when I worked in a group home with juvenile delinquents and quickly realized that all the kids that I worked with were continuing to get in trouble because of their alcohol and drug use. It led me on a path to do AODA counseling, which I did from 88 through 2008. And a lot of that was here. I moved to Door County in 1993 and started providing treatment at that time. So my path was really, my first 20 years of my career were in the addiction field specifically. I moved into administration in 2008, and now I see the impacts of the addiction in all of the other programs that we run. And I mean, literally all of the other programs. That being said, again, I could go on forever about this. When I was doing treatment, when I started, we saw primarily alcohol as a problem. And so when you asked about how would I characterize what I see now, I don't work with folks who are using, but I know the impact that the drug use is having on their lives is different. And the impact that we have on the community is different. It's more of a challenge for folks to recover. these chemicals are doing a number on their brains in terms of biochemistry, which makes the recovery process more complicated. And so I think that what we're dealing with today, 30 years later, 40 years after I started my career, is dealing with more and more complex situations, more and more complex family situations. And again, I think Door County, in my mind, has always been a little bit behind the rest of the world. Things kind of take longer in my mind, to get here. And I think this drug kind of epidemic has also been slower to get to Door County, because a lot of my counterparts have been dealing with similar issues to foster care problems and some other stuff we'll talk about for many years. And it's just starting to hit us now.
I'm Colleen. I'm the district attorney. I grew up here in Door County and came back here when I was elected DA in 2016, starting in 2017. Prior to that, I was a defense attorney. So I saw substance use and addiction with my clients that I worked with as a defense attorney. Now on the other side, I bring sort of that experience that I had working with people and hopefully some compassion to the prosecution. So in my role, besides prosecuting all crimes in Door County, I also work with the cases involving children who need to go into foster homes and juvenile delinquency. I'm a member of the treatment court team and the steering committee. So with the help of some of the folks at this table, we were able to it took years to get the treatment court up and running. Now we've been running, I think, for 3 years. We've had some great successes, one of whom is here at the table with us today, Jenny. But I definitely, while it might have taken longer for fentanyl and methamphetamine to get a hold on the community, it is here. And I recently was out to dinner somewhere and met some folks from out of town who have a place up here, like many do. And they said they found out what my job is. I was reluctant to tell them, but when I did, they're like, "Ooh, what's going on in Door County? Like, are there drugs in Door County?" And I said, yes, yeah, there are drugs in Door County. And they were baffled that there were drugs here. Really? What kind of drugs? Not anything serious. Like, we have everything here that you find anywhere else. So I think there's a misperception, but it's here. We're dealing with it the best we can with our resources, but we can always learn and improve our approach. And I think we're doing that with treatment court and our diversion programs that you'll hear a little bit more about. So.
Afternoon, my name is Pat McCarty. I'm the Chief Deputy with the Door County Sheriff's Office. I'm entering my 30th year in law enforcement, all here in Door County, the Sheriff's Office. 17 of those years I was on patrol, and then the last 9 years I've been the second in command. At the beginning of my career, the majority of the drugs we saw in Door County were marijuana and occasionally cocaine. And somewhere in the mid-2000s, we saw a shift where prescription pain medication became more prevalent. And when they started cracking down on the availability, doctors were rated on their ability to control pain. So it was relatively simple for somebody to go doctor shopping to get multiple prescriptions. And when they started cracking down on that, that's when we saw our first influx of heroin, and that heroin has progressed now into fentanyl.
My turn? Okay. Lisa Barnaby, behavioral health therapist at Health and Human Services. My passion for substance use and mental health comes from some family history. I lost my husband to an overdose. So I decided to try to help and save other families and other young mothers. My daughter was only 3 at the time. I moved from New Jersey to Wisconsin. I started education, and I'm a little late to the game, but I'm here at the table now. I've been working with this population for about 5 years now, and it is my passion to see this person to my right being very successful in her recovery and in the community. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
I'm Jenny Singer, and I am a recovering heroin and meth addict. Okay, I'm also sorry, should I start over?
Fine.
I'm also the daughter of 2 heroin addicts. My father lost his life in 2001 to his addiction, and my mother is currently in recovery herself. Spent over a decade with a man, my significant other, who is an active heroin addict. And as was stated, I'm 9 months, coming up on 9 months sober in another week, and I'm a participant in Door County Treatment Court. And I am on the board of the 115 Club here in Sturgeon Bay, and I'm active in different 12-step fellowships here, part of the recovery community.
I'm Timmy Sinclair. I have lived a charmed existence. I grew up in a nuclear family, military nuclear family. First time I decided to run myself through education, I studied forensics, was a forensic psychologist, and burned out of that really quick. Because that sucks. It is really hard to crawl through the sewers of humanity. Hang on to your own. From there, I ended up in education. I was a teacher. And the last school I was at was an alternative ed school. So I dealt with I lovingly called them my juvenile delinquents. Kids who were, this was it. It's this or juvie or this after juvie, just outside of the greater Seattle area. I saw kids that were dealing with so many grown-up problems while they're being so young. And it broke me. I felt like I just wanted to bring them all to my house and put them up in my house and make sure that they had what they needed and they had 3 hots and a cot and everything was going to be okay. As a teacher, it was excruciating to watch them fail. But now that I'm no longer teaching, every once in a while, I'll get a text message or a phone call or an email from a former student, and I just relish in their success. My work with United Way, believe it or not, sampled a little bit from education, a little bit from forensics, and I get to do everything. So I'm on the periphery. I have been blessed that I've always just kind of been on the periphery. But I am an ally.
So talking about what it's like right now in Door County, from all of you who are boots on the ground in one way or another, what are the resources available for substance use disorder sufferers, particularly people who are on probation or who are in the criminal justice system looking for rehab or requesting rehab or treatment? Or also, could you speak to people with substance use disorder who are victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse? Those things often go hand in hand. So yeah, resources and particularly maybe those 2 populations, you can speak to those at all there.
Are you wanting us to go down the line?
Yeah,
Because I think there's other folks that might be able to answer that.
Sure, I mean,
That's more relevant. You want to tell them about the court stuff?
So right now we've got obviously the treatment court. There's a particular criteria to qualify and be eligible for a treatment court. So that is, I think, one of our best resources that we have right now. But it's for folks with high need and high risk to relapse or to not be successful in sobriety. So there has to be a certain level of offense that the person has committed in order to get accepted into treatment court. So that once they're in treatment court, they're also on probation. They are offered whatever level of treatment that the experts deem appropriate, whether that's intensive outpatient treatment, or if we can locate them inpatient treatment at a facility somewhere outside of Door County, since we don't have any. So the range of treatment depends on each individual's need. The other program that we have going in the criminal justice system is our diversion program. So that's basically trying to catch folks before they would get to the point of needing the high level of resources that comes with treatment court. So that's catching them earlier down the road and trying to divert them now before things continue to get worse. And they get education, they get treatment or resources at the level that they need it. And in that situation, they're incentivized often by not having charges brought against them if they complete whatever program that they're in. Different than the treatment court. In treatment court, you are convicted, you're on probation. But there's a different set of, there's an entire team working with you to help you get through that process. In terms of victims of sexual violence or domestic violence, we don't discriminate based on that. We see there's a lot of, what would the word be, comorbidity, as it relates to people who have experienced trauma. It wouldn't be uncommon for them to have been victimized in their life in the past. So that's where our treatment professionals come in and have to address, those different components of that person's needs. But we certainly don't leave somebody out or ignore somebody because they might have been the victim of that type of violence.
Another thing that Colleen did not mention is we have a large number of people that are conditionally released after arrest with a monitoring program, with a drug patch or some type of GPS monitoring. So they're able to integrate back into society rather than stay incarcerated in jail. I can tell you at the beginning of my career, we offered no programming in the jail. It was a small linear jail, maximum capacity of 44 people, staffed by 2 deputies, and next to 0 to no program. Our jail population, I think there's a correlation between mental health and substance abuse, because I see a number of people, probably close to 50% of our jail population, are struggling with one, the other, or both of those. So one of the things that we do offer is we have in-house mental health provider for 40 hours a week to deal with our incarcerated population.
Yeah, I can only speak to my personal experience as somebody who was active in addiction in Door County on probation and in and out of the Door County jail. And I know that I was denied access to medical care after rape and assault. I was denied access to any kind of advocacy through Humboldt Door County. I was denied access to a rape kit, both at the jail and through probation here locally. There was a mindset of, because I had drugs in my system, that I had asked for it, or I deserved the punishment that came along with that. So, whatever was done to me was somehow justified. And that was if I was even telling the truth at all. So, yeah, that's all I can say about that.
It's important. The average ratio of health, or mental health provider to population in the United States is something like 320 to 1. And here in Wisconsin, it's like 450 to 1. And then here in Door County, it's 750 to 1. If you know, like a clinical social worker or a psychologist, psychiatrist, or any of the above that's interested in living in this beautiful county and working, I'll find them a realtor, anything they need. We don't have those resources here. This is a desert as far as mental health care goes. Unfortunately, with your situation, with her situation, and stigma is something else we kind of need to address. And it's kind of hard when you live in a beautiful place like Door County. As I said to Emily on our first interview, Mayberry RFD, where you have to actually convince people that we actually have problems, that there's stigma, and we have to bust through that stigma. There is a preconceived notion about how addiction is a failing of character, is a failing of moral, it's a failing of the individual. It's a disease. I don't have, cancer is my favorite go-to because, cancer. I don't get cancer because I'm failing as a human being. I have cancer because mutating cells. And sometimes your body just goes a little bit. Addiction is a disease. And we need to have that real discussion here in the county so that we can communicate more clearly. So that I don't have to have conversations during the sidewalk sale as to what Narcan's actually for. It's not actually heroin. It's these sort of things with this are really a stretch, and it's really something that is on all of us that know better to make sure that we're talking about it.
Question. What is the financial impact on the county by using diversion programs instead of incarceration or placements, stuff like that?
I would be honest to tell you that I would have a hard time putting a number on that at the moment. But I think that's part of what we're trying to gather as we have run treatment court and treatment court programs. I think the other thing that's complicated about it is those expenses don't come from us. So Health and Human Services helps support. We wrote the grant for the treatment court. We put some tax levy money into these program areas, but we don't fund individuals going to prison. We don't know how much that costs. So part of it is going to have to be an analysis of that over time. I think we're coming up on our 3rd and 4th graduates of the program. So we're finally getting to a point where we can start to take a look at some of that data. What those individuals process cost versus what it might have cost if they would have gone through the system further. I'm thinking about other thoughts in my head about other costs to the county, but I want to come back to the question about what's available. Colleen talked about the adult diversion program that right now, or historically, has been a program where law enforcement has to refer people in. We're working on trying to open that up, and we've got, I think, our first 1 or 2 individuals that self-referred. So it's an opportunity for people in the community to just come in and say, I need help. And they're not necessarily coming into Health and Human Services to a counselor, but they're doing it through the law enforcement office, where we have our diversion workers. So it's just another avenue for families or folks to reach out. We're going to try and expand that program over the next 12 months. Again, so that's more available. We're also trying to do some stuff more proactive. So we also have a youth diversion program with the same concept. Our goal is to not have these kids get into our legal system, but rather divert them and give them the help or education or whatever they need early on. So they're not our young adults in the diversion adult program, or eventually folks that are in our longer term system. So I just went off on a tangent there, but I would say, and again, as I'm thinking about it from my role, what I'm looking at is what's the impact on the county? So we have a huge impact in our child welfare system. We had our highest cost ever in terms of placements last year than Door County has had by a significant amount. We were about $170,000 over budget in that particular area. Today, we just pulled these numbers out of curiosity. We have 16 kids court ordered and out of home placements. Pat, we used to work in that field. Eyes just got real big. Out of those 16, 14 of the families, so it's 14 families. So a couple of them have 2 kids. Out of those 16 kids or 14 families, 10 of the families are specifically related to drug use. So it's a huge impact on what we're doing. We have another 17 kids in kinship care. So that's not court ordered, but still kids who are living with another family member. There's lots of reasons why that happens, but a general idea is a lot of times it's individuals who end up going to jail. And they're often going to jail because of their alcohol or drug problem. And then those kids might end up staying with family members for months or years. But the impact just related to child welfare has grown huge in the last couple of years. So from the financial side, those are other things I think we need to look at.
I saw a hand go up way back. Yep.
Curious to know if the fund is coming from the pharmaceutical companies mandated by court
to distribute funds to communities for these issues that they help to create. Are we getting funds in Door County to help offset and create some of these programs?
I'm gonna repeat the question. Just-
I'm sorry, I wasn't loud.
No, it's okay. That the funds that have been paid out in the opioid lawsuit, settlement lawsuits by big pharmaceutical companies are going to communities, much like big tobacco many years ago did. And are we getting any of those, and are they being used for resources for this issue?
We have gotten some funds and we are scheduled to get funds on an ongoing basis. So far, we haven't used those funds. We have kind of set them aside to try and use as we try to develop some sober living facility. So it's not a huge amount of funds and it's not going to fund us running this program for years, but it will be a starter for us to try and help it get going. We're also currently functioning on a 5-year, and I think we're in year 2 of our TAD grant. So we got a TAD grant. So TAD is the treatment alternative and diversion, and that's what's running our treatment court. So we got a grant. We got in the middle of a cycle and we got a couple years, and then we just reapplied and got in. So we're a couple years into another grant. So we've got a couple more years to keep this program going without having to put in county tax levy, but we will at some point need to go that direction. And we're also constantly exploring ways that we can generate revenue for the work that we're doing.
Thank you for answering my question.
You bet.
But that is one of the challenges is the county for a number of years has been up against the levy limit. So if that grant funding goes away, the county board is going to have to make some hard decisions on whether or not they're going to continue to fund these programs. And that's one of the challenges that we face every year creating our budget, because a portion of our budget and some of the programs we run are grant funded. Once we lose that funding, what's our next plan?
And that's what the question about what is the financial benefit to the county matters so much. Not to us necessarily as we're living it and working with everybody, but to keep the program going. And it's really hard to quantify it. We've heard numbers from Marinette, from a judge up there that, and I don't know if it's anecdotal, but that for every child that's born, not addicted to drugs, not having to go into the system, not having to be in foster, and the cost savings to that county is, I think, $1 million was the number that he would throw out there. We've had one child born, not addicted. We had a participant who was pregnant during the course of her participation, and we were able to get her into treatment, and that baby was born healthy without any issues related to substance abuse or anything like that. So, but it's very hard to quantify how much less time might somebody have spent in the jail, how much less time might their kids have been in foster. It's a very difficult number to nail down. We're trying, we're collecting data, but it's hard.
It's a perennial problem that how do you measure what doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mike, I do have a question. I was curious, where is the sober living house plan at this point in time? I know there was a lot of press about it a while ago, and then I haven't heard too much.
Right now, it's not moved really far. We have looked at a lot of properties. None of them have been really workable for various reasons. Our goal is to have something for both males and females.
Sure.
So the latest request from the county board has been to look at building. So we have some plans together in terms of what we would like it to look like. There's a meeting of the county board in September, early September, and I'll be presenting there on some options for the sober living house before we go forward with the next move.
Could you talk a little bit, maybe Lisa or somebody, about what the benefits of having a sober living place in Door County as opposed to sending folks away for treatment?
So you
How that works?
want to take it for a bit?
Sure. So having them home in their own community is a huge benefit, because this is where we want them to rebuild their lives. So they're rebuilding their life in a different county, starting in recovery, and then having to come and do it all over again here in Door County. It's a challenge. And so in some situations, with having a sober living is the environment that they live in currently may not be suitable to achieve recovery or long-term recovery. So having a safe place to go where they can focus on themselves, because recovery, you gotta be selfish of you at that time. So having that place for you to go and heal and where you know, walk in the door, you'll be safe and not be exposed to substances or mental health or psychological abuse.
Can I just say something about sober? My son went through the court system and addiction before. And I was so delighted to hear what Markham doing, that I can encourage you enough to continue. He went into rehab in Madison and then into a sober living home for 3 years. He would still be in the sober living home, but he qualified for disability housing. The sober living home after rehab with a godsend. So I hope we can see that materialize where there can in the men's sober. I mean, I learned so much about sober living, and some people have been in there for 5 years. I mean, they can be there as long as they need to or want to be. And there's rules to it, and he also worked with drug court. He went and talked and represented the sober living home in the drug court to get people to consider it as, you know, a step into sobriety. And that was going to be my question. Do we have one yet? Because on Facebook, I'm on this. I thought they were renovating a house or something, but I didn't know it was a sober living home. So I hope the money, you know, that we can do it, because that was very, very important. He was so glad to hear that Door County now has a drug treatment, and the diversion program sounds wonderful. And when you talk about money spent, to me, I'd rather see money spent there than what we pay to have somebody in jail. That's going to repeat, you know, and relapse. So money spent for those programs, to me, you can't beat that. That's worth.
There were 2 more questions, and then did you still have a question? Yeah, okay.
I think she was first, though.
Go ahead.
So when you're talking about balance of resources, what I wanted to ask related to that was, you know, all this really seems pretty closely structured around the court system, and what are you looking at for like the whole movement? You know, you're talking about integrating into the community. What is there out there in the community for people?
Are you talking like pre going to jail and?
Pre, post, youth.
Like, where's the education?
There's a picture to me.
Timmy, you want to?
No.
Answer that?
Oh, I'm gonna get my soapbox and everything. What we have right now is not enough. I am as a teacher, a recovering teacher, is what I like to tell people. I'm a recovering teacher. I am a big fan of education. I really hate the fact that we are still clinging to some old practices with how we treat drug education. When you're teaching, you know, from an abstinence only standpoint, and I saw you cringe, good response, good response. You're without even thinking about it, and it was one of those moments when I was teaching my juvenile delinquent. I'm alienating 30% of my student body in a regular school, let alone an alt ed school. Those kids that are already drinking and smoking and vaping and screwing around that little bit, they will weed here, you know, stealing a Percocet there. You're already alienating that 30%. So let's not do that. As far as the resources that are available, you know, United Way, I'm going to beat our drum. We are small but mighty, and we don't have enough. The county is lacking seriously. It is not because the county is anything other than the amazing place that it is. It is just because we do not have the mental health providers. We do not have the medical staff. We do not have, go ahead, but absolutely.
How many peer specialists? There's 3 peer specialists in this room.
In this room.
One of us is not unemployed and is a peer specialist. So how many like lower level professionals are you taking advantage of or looking to bring into your?
It comes down to money.
Yeah.
It comes down to money. And I will tell you, our executive director, who is not here, the county, is amazing. And I love being able to say to Amy Conley, we need this, and for her to say, okay, let's find the money. And we're looking for the money. But you know, we've got to have the skin in the game. And there has to be that community bond. How do we convince John Q taxpayer? No, really, we need to let the sober living facility be built, not in my backyard. Is our typical response, right? It's in
their backyard.
It's exactly, it's in your back. Would you rather it behind your barn or would you rather it here in the neighborhood? You know, it's one of those things. And so we have that huge stigma and that huge uphill mental battle to fight. Because we've been programmed in a very not healthy way to think about substance use and substance use disorder as bad. It is bad, don't get me wrong. It's with cancer. You know, it's the same sort of thing.
So part of what I hear in your question is about other resources, maybe as the self-help community as well. And I would say in 2008, I had 4 or 5 sponsors, both men and women, that I could give a buzz to help out with somebody. I don't know the status of that. Jenny, I'm not sure what your perspective is on the recovery community in Door County at the moment. I'm curious about that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty tight knit recovery community, but it is incredibly small and it's lacking. I mean, truthfully, I have a sponsor still out of Green Bay as part of a fellowship that deals more specifically with heroin addiction. And yeah, because there wasn't anybody here. There wasn't any 12-step fellowships even that were, you know, other than alcohol related when I came back to town. So, but it's not that there aren't recovering people here. There are. They just go elsewhere.
I think part of our hope, kind of as the treatment steering committee and some of the other folks who have been involved in these projects, part of our hope is that we build that community through success, right? When we've got people like Jenny, who's not leading a group, but being able to get a sober living facility where after the first year, we got people that are living there and helping us manage it that have been through it. And then eventually can help the community build a stronger connection. But we have a long way to go. I mean, I would say from a community perspective, it's a long road in terms of building those resources for people to support them. And I think some of it is just acknowledging the fact that we have the issue. You know, I think there are other recovery resources as well. And I know we've got somebody here from Smart Recovery, if you want to give it a little.
I'm raising my hand.
But you want to give it a little plug?
I'll dovetail it.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm a certified facilitator for Smart Recovery, which is an international organization. It's not to be in competition with AA, NA, or other peer support groups, or be a replacement for one-on-one professional counseling. I do have a healthcare background, but to go through their certified training was rigorous than what I thought, you know. But I enjoyed it because I had a foot surgery earlier this year that occupied a lot of my time. We started up a new on Sunday mornings, leaving some brochures here with a little sticker on the front. And I have networked with Health and Human Services, the Drug Treatment Court, and behavioral health at County Medical Center and a few of the churches. But I think I have to do another go around because it was kind of a gap for a couple of years when Smart during the pandemic didn't meet, and then we kind of had a
regrouping of sorts, if you will. So anyway, but truly so that's my spiel on smart recovery. It's mixed recovery, for, you know, the whole gamut of addictions. So all of a sudden you could be an addiction. So we're talking food, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, smoking, things like that. And people have come and gone with a multitude of those types of addictions and cross addictions. Purpose of why I was raising my hand when I moved, and when I moved to this county about 8 years ago, a sober recovery or facility had recently closed in Sturgeon Bay. And how do you see this new one, granted? Set of issues are probably bigger and more difficult, of course, than what they were when that one first started. But how do you see this recovery facility or housing and support be different than what was there not too long ago? I think that might have been private.
It was privately run, but we partnered with them, and so, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm monopolizing the conversation here, but. I would say I don't think it should be different. I think what we did before worked really well. So what we did before is if we had folks who needed treatment, we had options. If they hadn't been in treatment before, we could put them in our outpatient treatment program through the county while they lived at the house. We supported that financially. We paid for some of their room and board costs there. We could put somebody there for 6 months for less than 30 days at a treatment center. So if they stayed sober while they were in that facility, fantastic. And that's, I think, what we're looking to do. So it's free inpatient or residential treatment. And then it's also for after residential treatment, again, which also was happening at Kimberly House. So people that had gone through that 30-day residential treatment program could also go to that sober living for months afterwards. And I think that's where we would like to, we can create that flexibility, but so that we can use it for folks that are seeing Lisa in our intensive outpatient program. They could live at that house while they're doing it. They can continue to remain sober or not have too many relapses in the beginning so that we can get them stable. We would want to just keep them in our own community. Again, they're building on supports here as opposed to somewhere else. So I think what we did back in those days actually was pretty successful for a small community. And I see us replicating some of those same things.
I'd like to comment for the treatment perspective. I don't feel like you got your question answered, so I'd like to see if I can help with that. So as far as the treatment goes, I'll speak for myself, is that when I'm working with somebody, I'm looking at that whole person. I'm not just looking at their substance use or the behavior that is attached to the substance use. I'm looking at the mental health. I'm looking at what they need nourishment wise, what they need for education. And if I can't provide that, we use our community comprehensive services, which is CCS, part of Door County, and they have providers that specialize in different areas. We do mindfulness, yoga, equine. So when you're talking about the whole person in recovery, right, in our treatment programs and our diversion programs, we look at the whole person and split it up.
With you, and then we'll maybe move on to another question.
I have a quick question, but I also want to make a comment. Kind of related to this. League is sponsoring a program on the 27th of September. We are bringing a person from NAMI of Wisconsin, National Alliance for the Mental Illness. This is a person who is going to come. It'll be at Jack's Place from 5 to 7, I think, but there'll be media about this. And what we're hoping is that people who have an interest in starting a NAMI affiliate here in the county, which could provide some support for families and individuals in a variety of ways, will attend that, and hopefully a core of people can come from that and work with NAMI to create a chapter here, which could be a support. So you watch for the media. The other thing I wondered is if you could give us some ballpark numbers for treatment court for the different diversion programs, just to give us an idea of the numbers that are going through these programs.
Well, I didn't prepare any numbers, and I'm sure Joe didn't either, but I'll tell you the juvenile program, which is a component of education. Someone asked, where are the educators? The juvenile diversion program is all about education. So if that juvenile gets caught in school with a vape or marijuana or whatever it might be, something more serious, or they're engaging in behavior that's, problematic. They get referred to the diversion program, and they get education as a component of their treatment, or more services if needed. And that is I think that is our biggest population of participants right now, but it's also the shortest term participation. Treatment court can be 18 months or longer. Juvenile diversion is meant to be short-lived if possible. We wouldn't stop somebody from getting services if they had an ongoing need. But in terms of absolute numbers, I don't know. I can tell you that I had a judge recently comment to me. He had a teenager in there who had an ordinance violation, and he couldn't even remember the procedure because it's been so long since he's had any teenagers in front of him for minor tickets and things, because everyone's going to the diversion program. So he kind of had to stop for a second and remember how to do it, and he complimented the program on how successful it's been in kind of reducing that, rather than kids just having to go before the judge and get yelled at and have fine that they either have to pay or their parents pay for them. So I don't have numbers.
So I don't have numbers either. I want to say we probably had a dozen people in treatment court. Is that about right?
Probably, yeah.
Well, coming up on our fourth graduate, which I think leaves another 4 or 5. We've got a few in the pipeline coming in. And so we have some folks that didn't successfully complete. On the youth side, I only know this number because I had a state audit today. In 2021 and 2022 combined, we had 75 youth referrals that would have gone to youth justice. So we had closer to 70 referrals each year, but 75 of those would have gone into the youth justice system if we didn't have the diversion program. So in 35 to 38 a year, in my mind, is a great diversion. We did well. Our adult diversion, very small numbers. We're, to be honest, not satisfied with how that program worked. We launched it during COVID, which was part of our hang up, but I think we are looking at doing some design changes and how we're using that. Hopefully to start rolling that out within the next couple of months. But that program has been very small and I think kind of frustrating for law enforcement in how it works, because folks came in and we didn't have it set up in a way that we could monitor them well, and then it ended up going back to law enforcement for the referral to court too long after the fact. So we're trying to redesign that a little bit.
So to take a step backwards and explain the process at the time of the incident, our deputies go through a screening form and to determine whether or not the participant is eligible for juvenile diversion. And if they are, in lieu of issuing a citation or referral to colleague's office, they'll refer them to the diversion program. And only if that participant washes out, then does the deputy go back and issue that citation or the court. But that's kind of the first step in the process.
Thank you. We'll do one more question and then take a little break so that everyone can check out the tables and have some snacks and think of more questions, and then we'll come back and finish up the last part of the forum. So we did talk a little bit about stigma that's come up. I'd like to circle back to that because in just the work that I've been doing the last few months, that is a headline. That is the headline, I think, with this issue. And what makes it so difficult and so harmful. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about the stigma that follows substance use disorder and how you see it affecting treatment and recovery. And how specifically can we as a community reduce that stigma?
I would say that stigma for sure prevents somebody from reaching out for services out of fear of family members or their friends would know they have a problem with drugs or alcohol. They can't handle it themselves. What's wrong with them? All these messages, I certainly think, I know, it prevents people from walking in that door and asking for help. I don't know, I'm still waiting for the answer of how we fix that. I think What we can do on our end is the language that we talk to. These are human beings. And I think addressing them as human beings first and foremost is the most important. Like Timmy said, this is a person with a disease. And behavior associated with the addiction that they're suffering under is not something they want. And I think there's a couple people in this room that can speak further. So, but yeah, stigma is definitely a major issue with this issue.
One thing I think of is even just the programs are great, AA and NA, but they're anonymous, right? And so it's got this idea that like it's in secret and no one will tell your secret because you should be ashamed of it and you don't want anybody to find out. And I think that, and Jenny, I think in the article that came up today, commented about how there are people who won't go to meetings here because everybody knows you're there. They know your car, they know why you're parked outside of this particular place. But it seems to me like that it's supposed to be a secret. It keeps it a secret.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think it's interesting in Door County specifically. I know a lot of people in recovery that are fine with being part of recovery communities and travel to other recovery communities to take part in their different fellowships and those communities. They don't want to do it here because they're worried about the impact that will have on their lives here, their careers, their families. So I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic that somehow is amplified here in our community. Probably for a lot of reasons. I know for myself, having moved here sober and having, about 4 years in recovery and sobriety, and then having a relapse, and then getting caught up in the criminal justice world for the first time at 38 years old. The stigma, the shame, the lack of resources, the just the combination of all of it. I look back and I think of my first criminal charge, my first arrest, and then what subsequently happened. And I think there were so many opportunities where that could have been stopped. And I think of the reasons that I didn't maybe come forward and ask or seek out help, but I also think of all the opportunities where that was never offered. In my situation. So yeah, I think the stigma and the shame is literally killing addicts and alcoholics. And I do think that our 12-step fellowships, the anonymity part of those is what's kept those fellowships alive. And we do have to respect that. And I respect that very much in those rooms. They're there for a reason. But when we walk outside of, our meetings, I think recovering out loud is really important. It's one of the reasons why I am here today and why I agreed to do the NOC series. I think it's important for people like me to talk about what the real personal experience of this has been and what the impact has been on my family, on my children, on my mother, my friends, on my community. I know I did a lot of harm in my community through my relapse. So, I think it's important to speak the truth about that.
So I can tell you as a profession, law enforcement is probably when I first started. We have some of the highest rates of divorce, highest rates of substance abuse. And there was this machismo mindset that you didn't seek help. And I've seen it over my career. Some of my coworkers, the vicarious trauma where they're going on call after call and dealing with victims and dealing with horrific scenes, that cumulative effect adds up over time. And to cope, one beer after work before you even take your uniform off. One became two became a 6-pack, second divorce, third divorce, and I've seen it a number of times. What gives me great hope is that in the last several years, we've created some peer support programs and some internal mental health programs. And as I see this younger generation of law enforcement come into the profession, that stigma isn't there. So the hope I have is that our younger people have more of an open mindset, and that over time, some of those stigma related things are going to go away.
My name's Stephanie.
Everybody knows me. I grew up here. I'm also a recovering addict alcoholic. I'm also a certified peer specialist. I am a recovery coach. I'm a smart recovery facilitator. I just got a amazing contract as well, to work soon with drug court participants. I'm a person with lived experience, and the stigma, talking about that and exactly what you said at the end of Jenny, was recovering out loud. And that's what I've been doing since I was released from prison 2.5 years ago. Every place I work, everything I do, I'm a full-time student, and my teachers, my very much younger classmates, some of the health wellness program for be a health coach and personal trainer. You know, and I'm 41 years old. This county and state has invested a lot. And I say invested because I don't want to say waste, because I'm a success story. If you want, you know, I'm talking about money that was spent. There was a lot of spent on me. And now I'm here giving back to my community and being loud about my recovery. I'm loud about it with my kids. And I've now developed a great relationship with a couple of them. One of them still not ready yet, but I'm okay with that. The stigma and the shame and the guilt, that was a journey that I myself had to not get over, but get through. I had to work through that, because no matter what, somebody's always going to have a judgment against me. And it comes to a point where, am I going to let that keep me here? Am I just going to be like, and stay here, you know, because regardless of whatever anybody else may think of me, what I think of myself is what is going to be important in my success. And I have learned to love who I am. I love my old person because I would not be here. She made me survive. I'm not that person anymore. But if I were to have shame and guilt and all those things that come along with everything that I've done, I would not be here. You know, so a lot of it is teaching people to love themselves regardless of what anybody else thinks. And that is my goal with everybody that I work with, is it always starts from inside, and everything on the outside will come together.
Part of your question was, how do we change the stigma? And that's a great question, because I don't think I've got an answer after almost 40 years in this career. Having conversations like this would be phenomenal. And I don't mean it's not good now, but I know a lot of you, right? We've had these conversations. We've been sitting around these tables and talking about this for years. What we don't have is the people who don't get it. And I don't know how to get them to the table, right? Because I'd love to have conversations with people about, is Narcan a good idea or a bad idea? Because, right, that's a hugely controversial issue in my mind. I'm not exactly sure why, but I would love to have that conversation with people, but those are not the folks that are showing up and that we're able to educate. So how we educate those people, I'm not exactly sure. I think that's part of our challenge, is figuring out how to educate people who don't want to see the other side or see a perspective about it.
I think social media can be really terrible on that subject too. People are got everything to say on Facebook, but you reach out, say, hey, call me, or something, we should have a conversation about that. Suddenly it's not something they want to do.
Right.
It's very strange. Does the average age in Door County, which is like 52 or something like that, does that affect the old folks just want to be left alone? Does it affect their?
An effect on
the attitudes, on the stigma. I mean,
potentially, I mean, yeah, sure, I would believe that it probably has some impact on the stigma and or maybe
People understand drugs. I mean,
Say, yeah,
you know,
grew up in the
Wisconsin's great for drinking. Everybody understands that. And so they're willing, okay. We don't need to talk about that because we all know it. We all went through it. But this other stuff. I don't know.
And yeah, that'd be an interesting just conversation that we could sit around and debate and talk about for a long time. From my perspective, I don't know. I don't think they know about the alcohol problem. Right? I think we all think drinking. I mentioned that I started out working with kids in 1986. I worked at a program called Libertas, which was an inpatient kids treatment center in 1990, I think, is when I started there.
Oh,
I didn't know until then that my father was an alcoholic. Because I thought the way he drank and what we did in our house, that was normal.
mhm.
It didn't dawn on me till I was working with kids with real addiction. I was like, oh gosh, that's real addiction, but he's got it too. So I'm not sure that all of our older folks even get that dynamic. Do they want to know about the drug use? Probably not. I think, and I feel this way often. I live in my own kind of bubble here in Door County. I obviously, through my job, see it differently, but we live in a bubble here. It seems great. We've got a beautiful place to live. We've got great things to see. We've got tourism and arts and all kinds of stuff. That if I could just stay in that, I don't have to look at the fact that we have homeless people and addiction and mental health problems throughout our area.
Out of poverty.
This one here. Yep.
Hey there, thanks for calling on me. And thank you all for your service in a really challenging area. I'm hearing a lot about ways to fix a problem, and I'm not hearing anything about prevention. That's why I said I don't see where's the representative for education here. And you're saying, how do we reach people that can't come to the table? Well, we've got their kids held hostage for a few hours a day. And I know that the epidemics in this country of obesity, it's the same with addiction, alcoholism, it's escapism. And if kids could learn some tools, I know it's a big order and I know the schools are overwhelmed and all that, but I'd rather not have to divert a kid and get attention, a little bit of attention before, like just before. And I know I'm just saying, you know. And the other thing, the anonymous programs are not anonymous because they're secret. They're anonymous at the level of press, radio, and film. And that's so that nobody is speaking for the organization. It's not about being hush and it's not self-help. It's actually the most successful, you know, ways to keep people clean and sober for long term. And Alan and Alateen are such strong programs. Are we bringing them to the jails? Are we bringing 12-step programs to the jails?
We do have.
Yeah.
Some of those programs in there.
And Alateen for the kids whose parents are heroin addicts, you know? Did you see any of that?
I mean, I can say, you know, the stigma started for me way before I picked up the substance. You know, as the daughter of two active heroin addicts, growing up, I was ostracized by my family, my own family, and the communities that I lived in, and that was amplified when I moved to the Midwest at 12 years old, which was also the time that I started to seek out substances as a way of coping with that stigma. My parents did try to get me into therapy, and I did go to a couple of meetings of Alateen until I moved to the Midwest, and then there was no access to any of those. Well, there was access to therapists, but there wasn't to Alateen anymore. So no, I think that again, that's where resources are really important, and you know, access to, you know, those resources as well, which in my case was really limited. But also, I don't know that I would have felt comfortable because the stigma and shame of being, you know, I wasn't the daughter of alcoholics even, I was the daughter of heroin addicts, which was like, whoa, you know, in a really small town in the Midwest. And I just wanted to get as far away from that as I possibly could. So the last thing I wanted to do was go to Alateen or talk to a therapist about it, or yeah.
we have even one in. That no one's really talks about programs and services and education. But a driver that can really assist us like long-term policy. So we're going to public health and people are pushing for public health and assurance, assessment, policy. So challenge that everyone in this room is, like you guys all vote for your county board supervisors. Like what is their stance on this? Like you know their stance, like you guys should do it. You know what their stance is on drug addiction and the problem that we have in your county. And once you get the right people that county board and you start to influence them and they are on the same plane, things will start to change slightly. And the example that I use is really powerful because 20 years ago, I worked on a coalition to help the city of Appleton go to smoke free. They were the first city to go smoke free in the state. The second one was La Crosse. And I worked on that one too. And finally just said, this is stupid. We're gonna do 72 separate, 11 cities separate, and 11 tribes separate. Let's change, let's look at policy, work with officials to try to get change, to get more funding, more programming, more change in thinking, more so than just trying to like do programs. I think the programs and services are absolutely amazing. Stuff that Kelsey has done and the individual is able to start. But we can change 10, 12 people at a time. We can change thousands. I just went to dinner at Donnie's Wooded Lodge. And I walked in, I thought, wow, we went small kid. This is like what I'm worried about my clothes. Like smoking very small, whatever. It's policy. And people still have one kind of like Woodruff Malware, some of those bars they still like about smoking, they just bigger because they're so unfortunate. But we can change things by giving the right people in the right places at the right time. And that starts with us, like with our elected officials. So I just want you to kind of just think about like policy more so, just program services, resource money, how cities are trying to change thousands at a time. Look at the abortion things going on, like very big deal is that it's policy. So there's something to do.
There's one more question. I'll take one more question, let's back and then I think.
I just wanted to say, my mother was an alcoholic, my father was an alcoholic. My mother was one of 9, most of them were. My father was one of 11, most of them were alcoholics. When my father committed suicide, I ended up in foster care for 8 years. Lived with different people, sometimes I'm relatives. But I made up my mind. I watched what was going on. Watching all of these relatives. And I said, I don't want to drink. I don't want to be part of it. Their lives are. And I had one of the couple that made the same decision. The people money who were my cousins who were born in the 40s and 50s. They turned the dogs on their knees. And most of them are dead. My cousin said, I'm one of the Air Force, my other in the Marines, and both of them drug free. But the thing is, I can't get away. It's everywhere. It's in my family. It's with friends. You just can't get away. It's there.
I want to make one comment regarding the education. So with our youth diversion, we have a case manager that works very closely with all the schools in the state of Oregon. And she's working on getting some courses, speakers to speak at the schools to provide some resources for some of the schools there. So there is some education, but you got to keep in mind our programs are new and they're just starting to get some momentum. So check back in 5 years and there'll probably hopefully be a long list of resources we can provide everybody.
And to, again, I'm gonna get that teacher back again. I'm a big fan of getting them very short. I want to get a little kid, and I'll even take taller ones, don't worry. But if you give kids a skill, you teach them a skill, and then you give them an opportunity to use that skill, and then you recognize that they're using that skill, and you're like, hey, look at you, rock star. There becomes a bond that is built between not just the student and the teacher, but the student and the community. And once they have that community bond, you have healthy behaviors. That's, that healthy behaviors comes from that nurturing of that social development. They actually call it social development strategy, and we definitely need to just like slip some of that in there. Which is why I was able to couch robots into AOD. Because I want those kids to have that real connection to their community, that they're actually part of where they live, and that they're not just on the periphery, they are not just the luggage behind the grown-ups, that they have a responsibility and an ownership for where they live. When they have that, they make better decisions.
I think we'll take a break now, about 10 minutes, and come back and finish the rest of the program. Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
The Terra drug deactivation pouches. So if you have medications at home that you need to get rid of, please don't flush them down the toilet. Don't throw them away in the trash. These bags are, as I told Jenny, they're like magic cat litter. You put your medication in there, a little bit of water, seal it up, you squidge it, and you throw it away. It biodegrades. It brings all of the chemical compounds right straight down to carbon. And so then it just biodegrades and everybody's happy, and the fish don't have birth control. So they are phenomenal, and I have a bunch of them, and if I run out, you can always come and visit me at United Way and I will hook you up.
So we'll get started. There's just a few more things to talk about, and then we'll say the same thing. If you have questions, I'll try to get to everybody. And anybody who didn't get a question answered or asked, we'll try to round up at the end. There was a recent situation in Door County, an overdose that on July 31st, that the individual was Narcaned by a bystander, I believe, in the report. And it led to several people being arrested for various charges. That has had, in my conversation, has had some people has brought up the issue of the concern that those who are in active use may be too fearful of arrest or charges to call for help in an emergency. So you've got, two drug users, one of them ODs and the other one doesn't call 911 because they're afraid that it'll lead to a warrant and an arrest for themselves. I was hoping, we could talk a little bit about that from the various perspectives, law enforcement. I know Timmy, you talked to me about sunset laws in Wisconsin. Maybe you could speak a little bit, or I'm sorry, Good Samaritan laws in Wisconsin. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit. And then Jenny as well, from your perspective, and Lisa, or the treatment side of things in the recovery community, that feeling, that situation.
We do have a law in Wisconsin that if you are considered an aider, so if you're the person who calls law enforcement or brings somebody to the hospital who's overdosing, you as a result are immune from prosecution for possession of any sort of drug paraphernalia or possession of controlled substances. So there are laws in the books for folks who do aid somebody who's going through an overdose. So to make that clear.
The analogy that I want to use is just, remember being 17 and stupid. And if you're drunk, getting drunk because somebody got a bottle of Everclear and somebody else got some Mad Dog and who knows what else. And you're out in the field and consumed a bit too much, and I'm showing signs of alcohol poisoning. I really would want my friends to call 911. But if they are afraid of, setting aside prosecution, you're protected from prosecution, you're not necessarily protected from arrest. And just getting cuffed and stuffed at the age of 17 or 18 and having to have your mom and dad come and get you because Sue Ellen passed out and had alcohol poisoning, that's kind of no point. For me personally, I would rather keep somebody this side of the dirt than not. And as much as I support and love, our law enforcement and the people that work in these courts. We can't arrest people when they call 911 for something. It's just not good. The Wisconsin Good Samaritan law, there's a table, I on my table with the big yellow balloon. There is a breakdown of what happened with the Good Samaritan laws in Wisconsin as of August of 2020, when that law sunset. I don't know why the Good Samaritan law was built with a sunset clause in there. That is so crazy to me. As I said to Emily with bonkers, I just don't understand why we would do that. So me, middle-aged, retired soccer mom, if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody on the side of the road and I happen to have Narcan in my purse and I administer Narcan to that person, I'm not worried about me. I'm not worried about being arrested because I am being a good Samaritan. Even if that person has to have alcohol presents in a very similar way. But if I'm a 17-year-old idiot in a field, I am going to freak out. And I don't want it ever to be that, all right, we'll put him in the back of the car and then we're going to drive up to the hospital and just boot him out at the emergency room doors. Let's not do that. We have to bring that law back. We need to have those protections back so that I feel safe telling idiot children, that's what my dad used to call us, the idiot children. It's okay, please call 911. I would rather see you and your idiot smile face in the morning with a hangover than finding your body in the field. Because you were afraid of law.
So Kelly, how is what you just described different from the sunset laws?
No, we absolutely have the law in Wisconsin that where if you're considered an aider, meaning calling 911 or bringing someone to medical care, that you are immune from prosecution. So law enforcement shows up or first responders show up and you're in a room and there are fentanyl pills there with you, and the person who's overdosing and you've got a pipe in your pocket, you cannot be prosecuted for that if you're the aider.
So how is that different from the Good Samaritan law?
I'm not sure
I'm
what
confused.
she's referring to in terms of that.
Let me grab the program. Hang on.
There used to be, the law changed in 2020 where the person who overdosed, there was that they couldn't be charged, or if they were charged, they had to be offered what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, meaning they had to have the opportunity to not be convicted of a felony or whatever that level of crime might be. That was included in what the law is right now. So it included the aider and the person who overdosed. But now, as it stands, the overdose person doesn't have any particular protection. But the person who is the aider is immune from prosecution for certain crimes, for possession of controlled substances or illegal substances, and for possession of drug paraphernalia.
That include alcohol?
Out like an alcohol overdose, like she's referring to?
How wrong can I bring him in because he died?
No, it does not apply to OWIs.
Not- I don't know.
Nope, does not apply to OWIs. No.
Okay.
So there is no immunity. There's immunity from prosecution, but there is no immunity from arrest, which is, an entirely different animal that the good deputy can probably explain a whole lot better than I can. And furthermore, if you are both on parole, or if you're on parole and you're the one calling 911, you're not protected. That you're not, there is no more immunity from parole, probation, or extended supervision. So you could theoretically have that revoked. I understand, the punitive aspect of law enforcement and how we have to have consequences for actions. But I honestly don't believe we can arrest ourselves out of addictions. We can't. It can't be done. We've been trying for 40 years. it just. It destroys lives and it destroys communities. And we need to rethink completely our approach to not only the person who is having that overdose, but the people that love and support them. And also the people who are not necessarily having that overdose, who are not as maybe active users. But I don't want anybody's freedom to be at risk. Because they call them. Please, 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 just keep people this side of the dirt, because they can't get better if they're not breathing.
Jen, can you speak to any of this or from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I personally found that recent series of arrests as a result of overdose alarming and scary. And I know a lot of people in the recovery community felt the same way. I've personally been in a situation where I have been using somebody who's overdosed on multiple occasions, and I have been the person who has overdosed. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for Narcan and people being brave enough to call 911. And I have had to do that too for people I cared about. I've also been terrified to do that, to make that call. I know the anguish that you go through because, as Timmy said, a lot of us are on probation or out on bond or might have a warrant for our arrest, or we're scared that our children are going to be taken, or we're scared of the ramifications for maybe the home that we're in or the other people that are around us. Those things are all going through your head at warp speed, and somebody's not breathing in front of you, and you have a quick decision to make. And I have told people before that if I overdose, don't call 911. It's not worth it. And I felt that. So yeah, I think when people in our community, in our very small community, addicts who are already dealing with all like the stigma and everything that we just talked about, read articles like that and see what just happened, those individuals who were brave enough to make the call. I think people will end up dying as a result of those things. I think the next time somebody probably won't make that phone call. And I think it's alarming. I think it's scary. And I think it definitely is a conversation that needs to be had moving forward.
May I ask you, when you say scary, because of the consequences for the other people who call the paper, is that people said scary several times. So I'd like to understand more.
Correct. Yeah. What happened as a result of somebody calling 911 to save somebody's life was not just that the police came and offered aid and got that person to medical care. It sounds to me like the entire house, there was a search warrant issued then, and everybody in the home at the time was subsequently arrested. And as a drug user, as somebody who has been in that position, if I was actively using here right now after having read that, and I was in a house where somebody overdosed, I can tell you I would be real quick to pick up the phone, and I don't think anybody else would be either when our freedom is on the line, our children, our families. And it's a horrible position to be in, because obviously loss of life is the worst possible. Is the worst case scenario. As users, we don't want the people we're using with. We love these people. We don't want to watch them die. But when you're weighing those consequences, it's incredibly scary. Also, Narcan, I can tell you right now, isn't reviving people. So in all of my overdoses, personally, I was given 4 or 5 injections of Narcan, and still a lot of times needed medical, needed to go into the hospital afterwards. And in I've Narcaned at least 10 or 15 people my time using, and I've never given somebody 1 or 2 shots of Narcan and had them come back from that. So if you don't have 4 or 5 of those, you're probably not going to be able to resuscitate that person at home. And even if you do get them breathing, a lot of times they will go back out within an hour and a few minutes. So they need medical attention. But yeah, addicts are afraid to drop that person off at the hospital or to make, especially to make a phone call from wherever they're using. Yes, that is a terrifying prospect.
Thank you.
Give me a comment. So I am the one that wrote that press release. And without going into any specifics about that incident, because it's hasn't been through the judicial system. Our investigators obtained a search warrant, not solely based on that 911 call, but a more global investigation that had been ongoing. They referred charges to the district attorney. The district attorney was the one that was able to decipher which charges they're immune to based on Good Samaritan laws and which ones were appropriate. The first thing I did after that incident, I went to our investigators. I talked to them. I said, am I going to compromise any investigation yet? And they said no. So then I went and talked to the sheriff. I said, Sheriff, I'm thinking about doing a press release. And our press releases get put on Facebook and those things take a life of their own anytime we do a release. But one of the things I talked to her about was I knew that I was coming to speak at this forum. And I wanted to create some awareness, controversial or not, that number one, we have Narcan, we have overdoses, we have drug houses here in Sturgeon Bay, in Door County, that this situation is something that's in our community. So what wasn't meant to shame or ridicule anybody. Like I said, the investigators made those arrests based on a search warrant. The sole purpose behind my release, because we have a number of drug investigations every year, and we don't do press releases on every one of them, but I knew that I was coming to this forum and I wanted to create some awareness.
During treatment, the clients are afraid to call 911 if they're in a situation that somebody is overdosing. Oftentimes, these clients are on paper, they are probation, and they understand that their probation rules require them to not be around any substances, complete sobriety. So they're well aware of these things. So them hesitating to call, that is a true fear. And I'm kind of in a unique situation because I'm also seeing the side of law enforcement, right? And I also know all the hard work that's been happening. Again, I'm going to go back to our programs, drawing awareness. We work very closely with law enforcement, and I know I can say with confidence, the first reaction is not to arrest and put them in jail. The first reaction is to make sure that they're safe, and then after deal with the ramifications. But when you're talking about a situation like this, there may have been somebody with an active warrant. Law enforcement has to act on that active warrant if that person is in the house and so forth. And then we've got the safety component of it, right? So if you've got a house where you've got people that are using and there's substance there, got to take everybody out of that environment for safety. So I hear the fear and I understand the fear, but I also see the other side that there is work that's being done in Door County. We have wonderful law enforcement, both in the Door County and the police department, that generally do care about the population.
I can tell everybody too, that in terms of the probation and parole, the Department of Corrections, that has has evolved with the same sort of evolution that we've been going through here in terms of, it used to be where if you were at a home and you were on parole or on probation and law enforcement was called and there was drugs in the house, you would automatically get arrested, taken to jail. 5 or 7 days later, your agent comes and talks to you and maybe you get revoked, or maybe you're going to spend more time in jail on a sanction. It is far more common in circumstances today for when the Department of Corrections is called because somebody had police contact for whatever reason, that if it's related to substance use, as long as their personal safety is not an issue, oftentimes those holds aren't being placed like they used to, like back in the day. So the Department of Corrections has evolved significantly from where they used to be. So while the law might have now made it so they're not immune from arrest if they're on probation or on paper, like you might hear it, more often than not, we're seeing in these circumstances where the after hours agent is getting called, they're saying, don't place a hold on them, have them report to their agent tomorrow, and things get talked through. So even that side of things is evolving with what we're learning in terms of how to best to approach this.
Speaking for the Department of Corrections, sorry, Joe, but
ahead.
they're referring more population to us for services for mental health and substance abuse services as far as if we're instead of doing punitive. So we're seeing a lot more of that. So I love those referrals, keep them going, because like Jimmy says, keep up, everybody above ground. That's the only way we get better as a community.
And the evolution has happened as a community, right? We have treatment court. We have diversion programs. The first grant I wrote for a treatment court was specific to AODA or OWIs was in 2008. It didn't pan out. If the program didn't work, we couldn't get it to stick. It took us till 2020 to do it, but we've got it going. So we're looking at this issue differently. We are working at keeping people out of the criminal justice system, but there's a tie to it. That probation is necessary to hold people accountable so that we can get them to continue. And again, it's a process, but how creative or how great is it that we're talking to people about if you are honest and you tell us what's going on and where you're at, we will give you credit for that. And if you relapse, we're not going to toss you back in jail or give you consequences because of a relapse. If you keep doing that, and you lie about it, and you're being dishonest, and some of those other addictive type behaviors, then there'll be consequences. But it again is really about meeting people where they're at and then helping them move to the next step in recovery. I think as a community or as a, at the law enforcement, district attorney's office, treatment providers, we're getting that probation and parole, and we're finally doing it. So I'm pleased with, I'm excited about where we're at in terms of how we are treating folks. We'll keep having to improve, but
We'll keep improving.
yeah.
I just noticed the timer. We're almost at 8:30, but one more thing to talk about, maybe a good way to end on, is what. So this is new. A lot of the evolving attitudes, they're new, the programs are new. So where do you see this going? What still needs to be done? What resources, money, staff? Yes, what is? So, maybe if you could each quickly describe your ideal situation for where Door County would be maybe in 5 to 10 years. Substance use. We can go right down.
You're telling me you want me to start?
Or if somebody else has, that comes to mind first.
I think we need providers and we need fewer wait lists. And we need providers in the form of like Lisa, who does incredible work, but we need facilities. We need something local where we can keep people here. We need sober living, and we need specialists who can address both the mental health side of things and the substance abuse side of things, because they come hand in hand. I think that would take a lot of the pressure off of law enforcement, a lot of the pressure off of trying to find the right way to approach it if we can get people help.
I'm gonna go with education. I'm gonna end with that note, because it's a matter of educating a community, educating families, educating ourselves constantly, always, never think that you know it all, because we don't. I'd love to think that one day there won't be a thing called addiction and we can overcome that. Unfortunately, I don't know. But if we can heal one family at a time, keep one person in recovery that can pass the torch, like we have these amazing people in this room today, right, that are gonna pass the torch out in our community, and that's how it's gonna spread, that pay forward. And I think that's how we're gonna help and heal Door County.
My first AOD meeting, Lisa talked about planting cherry trees. And that stuck with me. And so it's funny having these conversations with people. I've been in on planting a cherry tree. Because you don't get a piece of fruit off a cherry tree for 15 years. And I want to start with really small cherry trees. I really want to work with very short people and getting them engaged. And that education component is huge. But getting kids to look up and look out. And pulling in their mom and dad to get interested in what the heck it is they're doing. And I keep saying ownership, 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 and having that ownership and that commitment and that bond with your community is gonna be key. And that is where I am leaning heavily, with my part of the AOD work. These guys handle the cleanup crew, and I'm hoping to make it so that they can put away maybe a mop or two. I'm hoping that we can get these kids and start with our very young and help them manage those skills to prevent actual honest to God prevention, drug use prevention by getting them engaged and involved with the community. And to also help them be smart and make smart decisions and to count on them. We trust our kids to use knives and matches. And we teach them this is safe and this is not. This is how this is used and this is not. I don't see why we can't do that with everything else. So for me, education is key. And I got a different crowd that I get to work with. And that's where I'm hoping we go. I would just love for Lisa to be bored out of her mind. For the district attorney to be bored out of her mind. And you know, they have to take up a building. That's my goal.
Well, I can tell you some of the things that we've done in the last several years. Is we have embedded school resource officers in all 4 of our mainland public schools. And one of the concerns with that was that it was going to be a pipeline through the judicial system, but we're 4 years into this process, and I think it's shown to be anything but that. Rather than have patrol officers respond to schools, and we were before the resource officers, we had constant calls at the schools. They're showing up there, triage, put a Band-Aid on it, fix it for today and then move on. But having those embedded resource officers that are able to mentor, teach and guide our younger students has been very beneficial. One of the other things we did was we added a mental health community engagement deputy. And we're very excited that now we're looking at adding a co-responder, a social worker to co-respond to, because I look at our drug use issue being intertwined with the mental health issues that we're seeing. I mean, they're not 2 separate worlds, they're intermingled. So we're very excited to have that co-responder with our mental health community engagement.
Question.
Yes.
What is your views on putting somebody with lived experience into the school?
As far as
Somebody that's. Like you're talking about social workers and police officers and mental health officers, those can be sometimes really intimidating.
Mhm.
Whereas if there's somebody as like myself going in there, you know, that's been there and through it. You know, it's my daughter, she hangs out, she goes to fast school, she's always in Ashley's every day in Ashley's room, but she's like, Mom, you should come and work with Ashley as the other counterpart. You know, and that was a lot of benefits at that. I was only there for an hour, but briefly when they did the kids thing at Prince of Peace, it was something that I talked to the Southern Door. I can't remember who he was, but he's like, oh, you do peer support? He's like, oh, that would be pretty cool. And that's, you know, because it gives that, you know, because a lot of kids who are struggling, they don't want to go to the.
And also,
You know,
let's not forget the boys and girls. That's another area that would be beneficial for education and.
It's an interesting concept, and again, I don't know that we have a model for it. I'm not saying that we couldn't create one, but
5 to 10 year plan.
it's an interesting concept, because that's part of, my brain always goes to, how would I fund that? Right, where would I get the money for that? So that's a potential grant idea, that's a potential, you know, looking at other alternatives, because it's not something that I've thought of before. I want to piggyback on what Pat said, so I'm going to jump off your question. We have Stride, which is a mental health counseling in the schools. And we have, actually, our department is not currently providing in school, but hospital staff are and other private agencies are providing mental health counseling in the school. That's being funded through grants and some United Way stuff. That's another piece that we're doing on the front end. I would say, again, Brad, I said this multiple times, I've been in this community since 1993. In 30 years, we've had one or two. We've consistently had some outside the county AODA providers. We no longer have them. So Timmy was talking about the mental health. If we just go specific to AODA, we don't have enough treatment. So that's a resource that we need. In my mind, that's a limit, but it shouldn't necessarily be the county. And what I mean, and I'm not saying that because I want to duck the problem, but people don't want to come to us. They come to us because they have to and they don't have an alternative. But it would be great to have a treatment facility or an option for people to go to before they get too far down the road and they're now in our court-related systems. So that's a resource that we need.
Everyone's spoken to this except for you, Jenny. You wanna maybe end on what your 5 to 10 year dream substance use disorder situation in Door County would look like?
Okay, yeah, no pressure. I think what I would like to see is, as a community sort of mirroring what I experienced in treatment court. I've been thinking about this a lot as I approach the end of my time in Door County treatment court. What was it that really changed things for me? What did treatment court do for me that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else? And what didn't they do for me, right? But I think the biggest thing for me, it what really changed my life was their belief in me, their faith in me. It was the first time in my life that I had people, judges and law enforcement and attorneys, therapists, really believed in me and who saw me as a person and cared. And so, that really was a game changer for me, and it still is. And I think it kind of gave me the ability to be able to do what I had to do for myself, start to love myself. It was a huge part of recovery. It's not just about removing the drugs and alcohol. That's a really small part of the whole thing. And also gave me the courage to be able to do the things that I'm doing today. So I would love to see that mirrored as a community. I'm a single mom and I've heard this a lot, like it takes a village to raise a child. And I think it takes a village, it takes a community to overcome addiction. I have a lot of support today from all kinds of, from so many different facets of our community. It's not just treatment court anymore, but it started out, it was just treatment court. They were the only people who believed in me left. And, I could save my life. So that's my goal, that's my dream, and I hope to be a part of that moving forward.
May I interject another thought? I'd like to respond to the gentleman over here when he talked about calling your county board people. I used to be a county board person and absolutely call your county board people and hold the sober living thing over their heads and don't. However, Deputy McCarty talked about the levy limits. Folks, that's your people in Madison. You need to call them too. That hamstrings local government from doing the things they may need to do. Salaries go up, all of that stuff, costs go up, and yet we have had a 0% levy cap for 10 years, 15 years.
So, well, I started in
2006.
2008 and we haven't had a levy increase since then.
Okay, does that make any sense?
That's 15 years ago.
The other piece is, there is a whole lot of money. We just went through a budget cycle in Madison, and there is a lot of mental health money that the governor proposed that got cut. And there's a whole lot that's gonna get talked about as a tax return or something. We need to invest in some of these things. The school money, they cut to $30 million, and it's gonna be divvied up among all the schools, and you know how much that's gonna help in terms of an amount in mental health in the schools. Those folks have to hear that, yes, you make your priorities for what to do with this money, but it needs to go for things like this. So please call your county board person and then call your senator and your assembly person.
You can add off of that, because over here, policy, you guys want resources, law enforcement, justice. Yes. I think addicts and
all of this stuff goes to Madison, goes to obviously the truck. And why we're not all together, calling our representatives in from all of these angles and saying, just this stuff is what we need. Why the hell aren't we getting it? We're all separate. We're all divided. The A's gotta do what she's gotta do. Law enforcement has to do what they have to do. They're about addicts are gonna do what they have to. People trying to help. People, until we get together and start doing this, you're never gonna get the resources.
No, but I think we've done a decent job of really tearing down our silos and
I think Door County is exceptional for it.
attacking an issue such as this, where we're not isolated from the DA or from
Absolutely.
human services.
And as I've heard about other counties around, they remark about how well our county works together. You guys are an exception. But still, we don't have the money, we don't have the policies, we don't have the laws. It's criminalized. So we either get together and get them in the same room, or it's gonna be here next year saying the same stuff.
Thank you, everyone.